Welcome back, my Amai moms. Stats right now show that 1 in 5 women in the US are struggling with some sort of mental health condition. And sadly, those numbers keep increasing. We know our mental health affects every other aspect of our lives. And I personally believe that becoming mentally strong is worth any effort. So today we have the incredible opportunity to be taught from Dr. Gray Otis. He is a licensed clinical mental health therapist and is also the author of the book, Key Core Beliefs, The Heart of Happiness and Health. He has developed multiple training programs for effective mental health approaches, as well as trauma-informed care for parents. He is a past president of the American Mental Health Counselors Association and regularly presents at national conferences on trauma and integrative behavioral health. He came on our podcast because he strongly believes in our mission to help strengthen mothers, to help strengthen you, because you are worth it. I can't wait for you to learn from him. Let's dive in. Okay, welcome Dr. Otis. Thank you for being here and taking your time to help mothers tonight. We're really excited to have you here. You've written a book. It's called Key Core Beliefs. Can you tell us a little bit about this book, how it came about, and anything with the foundation of that book?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of an exciting part of what we've done in the last several years. A couple of us were trauma specialists and working with individuals that have gone through some pretty serious things. And we had been trained in an approach to that and found it very effective about 80% of the time, which is very high in psychology treatment. But what we both came to a conclusion was that people recovered from trauma and chronic stress when something happened within them, that they started to see themselves differently. And what we noticed there, that this was part of the treatment, that the individual had these negative thoughts about who they were. And when those thoughts changed to what we consider accurate and constructive thoughts, replacing the negative ones with positive ones, the symptoms went away.
Wow. People
with severe PTSD, complex trauma, no longer met the criteria. And it doesn't take 3 years of psychotherapy. It takes some pretty concerted effort for a month or two. But we found that what a person believes about themselves was the core. And that was the basis of 3 of us getting together, a psychologist, a marriage and family therapist, and I'm a clinical mental health counselor, coming to the same conclusion that if we really wanted success, if both as an individual as well as in professional work, that it was about these central core beliefs. Now, it's not the only thing, and it's not a magic wand, but it does say that if we don't pay attention to what we believe about ourselves, we can apply all sorts of different techniques, approaches, and we'll still have that center core of what we believe ourselves. That's unresolved. Exactly. And if you want to resolve trauma and anxiety and depression and virtually any other mental disorder that we all deal with, we have to at least pay attention to that, give it the focus. So we first wrote the book, Key Core Beliefs, The Heart of Happiness and Health. And it really is the heart, the core.
Right.
And then recently we've just put together a clinician's guide. So mental health therapists can use these same things, and we say, bring whatever you've learned in your graduate training.
Yes.
Use it.
Interesting.
But keep the focus on what the person believes about themselves and help them transition from negative core beliefs to positive core beliefs.
Have you seen anyone else in your industry do something similar to this?
Well, we see people kind of on the fringes.
Okay.
One fairly well-known approach to a trauma resolution talks about negative cognitions and positive cognitions.
Okay.
Well, it's kind of an interesting term.
Okay.
But it's not just about what we're thinking. It's about the convictions we have about who we believe we are. So it's not just changing thought patterns. It's about changing beliefs about the person. And this is not simple stuff. It's not like standing in front of a mirror and saying, I'm a good guy.
Yeah.
It's about really, Gray,
truly getting to that point where you believe that.
Yeah.
So it's not just thoughts, it's beliefs. That's why you named the book Key Core Beliefs instead of something like Key Core Thoughts or thought process or something. Interesting.
Right.
Interesting. Okay. And you came out with this book about how long ago?
Well, it was published about 6 years ago.
Okay.
And it's been given very, very good reviews. We're glad about that. But the idea is the book was there for people that realized that something wasn't quite working as well as they'd like to in their lives.
Right.
And they'd probably tried other things.
Yeah.
But we kind of came at it from a different, almost a unique way.
Right.
Because outside of that therapeutic approach that I was talking about, we didn't find anybody else that was addressing that central feature about how we see ourselves. So this approach basically says a couple of things. First off, we do have to pay attention to our core beliefs. And when we find negative ones, we have to find out, are they really accurate and are they constructive? And the vast majority are totally inaccurate.
Yeah.
And they're not helpful. Yeah. Okay? So we have put together an approach so that people can start to be aware of that and then do something about it. It's a pretty simple approach, actually. But the other thing is to pay attention to the whole person. It's not just mental and emotional well-being. It is about physical health. It's also about how our relationships and how they're working for us. So it's real balance. It's a very holistic approach. And you combine those two things, and they're all interrelated, you see that people start to say, hey, you know, my life is pretty good and I'm a pretty good person too.
Right. Right. And I've seen in society, we see people where they will hyper focus on just one aspect of their lives, whether that's health.
Yes.
And they'll get and they may be truly an incredibly healthy person, but their marriage may be falling apart.
Yeah.
You know, or you have someone that is a CEO at, a big company and their health is falling apart. You know, to strike that balance is difficult for most people, but it's so vital for the entirety of our well-being. Can you go into the acronym of HEART to make sure we know all 5 of those? Yeah.
In the book, we actually start out before the book begins, talking about what we refer to as HEART. And so the subtitle of the book is The Heart of Happiness and Health. And what that refers to is that we pay attention to all aspects of our life. So HEART is an acronym that stands for health, physical wellness. What we go next to is emotions, and they're all interrelated, but emotional, for example, intelligence, emotional self-regulation, very, very crucially important. A lot of people just don't know how to do that.
Right. Yeah. And we know kids, it's hard to do that. But even nowadays in society at large, we're not seeing people that know how to self-regulate, or they're not choosing to.
Yeah.
Which is really concerning.
It is. Oh, yeah. And we're giving into, the darker side, so to speak. And by the way, that contributes directly to our key core beliefs, and not in a positive way, obviously.
Right.
Yeah. The third area is awareness, is what we refer to it. It just means using our cognitive abilities of logic, reason, being aware of things, and then being able to manipulate or maneuver in our world.
Mental side of things. Okay.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay. The next one is relationships. And we really believe, regardless of the person's circumstance, that how they're interacting with others is so crucial. And we actually have an acronym for that, which is GREAT. And GREAT, we won't go into tonight, but it talks about how these are so connected to how we see ourselves. Our relationships with others really, to a very large degree, determine how we see ourselves.
And so many of those beliefs have been started at such a young age with, attachment and having secure attachments, or if you weren't, there's we could, that's a whole other topic we could go into, I'm sure. Okay. And so relationships and
the last one is what we refer to as transcendent. And that's anything that just kind of lifts a person, that's motivating for them or inspiring to them. I had a friend of mine that, for example, if he didn't get out and go on a really good hike in the woods, he just felt like he was missing something in terms of his sense of transcendence. And it's hard to pin down, and it's different for different people. Some people, it's going to church. But for a lot of people, for me, It's a beautiful sunset. Yes, that's emotional,
Yeah.
but it takes you beyond just emotion.
Right. Right. That is neat. And all 5 of those are paired with what you were talking about at the beginning. And you see both of those. And if people can connect both of those, you see that they can thrive. Is
Yes.
that right?
It's precisely right.
Okay.
And you need both.
And you need
it's
both.
about how you see yourself in terms of your core beliefs and how you're using them or not using them appropriately. And then how you blend that in with these 5 heart essentials. We call them the essentials.
Okay.
And then when you put them together, we have what we call a positive sense of belief
of
about
who you
ourselves,
are.
our self-belief
of
identity.
how you think and how you view yourself. That's interesting. I was looking and I saw that from the National Science Foundation, they were saying that 80% of our thoughts are negative and 95% of our thoughts are repetitive.
Yeah.
So if this is not a huge wake-up call to anyone listening to this, you're trying to help people solve that.
Yeah.
Solve that repetitive cycle, because I do not think people understand to almost any degree how much of an effect our own thoughts are having on us. We think, oh yes, what we view and everything has an effect, and it does. But the majority of what's coming through to our brain is our own thoughts.
Self-talk.
And if 80 some odd % of that is negative and 95% of that is repeating, no wonder why there are so many people that are truly struggling with mental health concerns. I mean, it's just devastating.
They feel like something's missing in their life, and they have an inherent sense that life for them could be better, and it can be. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But again, a lot of people just don't have an awareness. I got to tell you, I've been working through these kinds of concepts for about 20 years.
Wow.
And I still catch myself.
So none of us are immune.
No. And many of what we're talking about, the study that you're mentioning there, is thoughts that are conscious thoughts. But a lot of our beliefs just lie below the conscious surface.
Subconscious messaging.
Yes.
That we don't even realize that we're
Right.
telling ourselves.
But the good news, you can become aware of them. And when you are, you can do something about them. And it's really valuable to do that.
That is so true. So can you give us an example of maybe just like with all the women that you specifically are working with, and the majority of your clients are women?
Yes.
Can you give us maybe the top 5 negative key core beliefs that you hear consistently?
Well, the top number 1 is I'm not enough. And from that comes all sorts of other beliefs.
And we could have, how many, do most people have, a few key core beliefs, or you think, or is this like maybe hundreds? I don't know what.
We haven't been able to log it.
Right.
But we believe it's literally hundreds and hundreds of beliefs. I mean, for example, we could just take a simple belief, I'm honest.
Okay.
Well, that has all sorts of other beliefs attached to it.
Okay.
And so just a simple belief usually has many kind of waterfall beliefs that come out of it, so to speak. But yeah, the most negative ones is I'll never measure up. I'm not perfect. I've got to do better. What's wrong with me? Those are the kinds of things that we see. And I got to tell you, when I see somebody for the first time, within 20 minutes of sitting down and listening to them talk, I'm identifying multiple negative core beliefs right off the bat. I don't even
20 minutes you can just ding 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 ding.
And I'm not bothering with diagnosis. I don't care about diagnosis.
Right.
I do care as to how the person's seeing themselves.
Right. Right.
And that's what we maintain.
Because that's fundamental. That's
It is
the root of what's happening.
That's exactly right.
And I feel like there's so many people that are trying their best to help individuals, and they take a top-down approach, where the reason why I was really specifically interested in having you come on this podcast is because you are taking a bottom-up approach, an inside-out approach instead of an outside-in approach. Can medications be helpful in certain circumstances? Yes. Can all these other, ways that through history we've been able to see help in different regards for mental illness? Yes. But this, to me, is so unique because you're getting truly to the core. And I haven't seen that. I haven't seen in the research I've done people that have gone to this length as you to get to the very fundamental core of what's happening in a human, which is their belief system. So
that's exactly correct. And it is interesting that we see a lot of people doing a lot of things about symptoms.
Yes.
And that's very helpful. There's nothing wrong, like you said, with medications or thought stopping or any other of these kinds of approaches. I'm aware of almost all of the major psychological approaches, and they're all can be very helpful.
To an extent, it sounds like.
But if you never get to that center core, you kind of miss something.
Wow.
And more importantly, when you do address that center core, other things become much more effective and people resolve sometimes lifelong anxiety, lifelong depression, severe traumatic experiences. It's almost miraculous. I don't like to use that word very often, but when I see some really significant changes in an individual's life who has lived through sometimes horrible experiences and see them see themselves in that more positive, uplifting way that is, as we say, accurate and constructive, their lives change.
It's life-changing.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be so neat to be the person you're in and sitting in those times where you're seeing people's lives change over and over and over again, because of what you're able to help them see within themselves. Wow.
It might be of help to them. They do the work. I'm just kind of walking with them for a while, but boy, is it a blessing to me to see that and to see their lives become so vibrant.
Right.
Yeah.
Inspiring. I bet. And especially like you said, I think when you said people that have gone through severe trauma, I believe that there's some people out there that think that they would never, they will never be whole. They will never be healed. They will never be happy again because of some very, very hard, real things that have happened to them. And yet you're telling me, if I understand correctly, that you've seen people even in, you would consider the worst of the worst circumstances, be able to be happy again because of this?
That's exactly right. Wow. See, that one of the real issues of trauma, and I also would add a term that we don't use very often, but is chronic distress, which, for example, a child that's being criticized quite regularly by adults. Okay. That is not traumatic in terms of PTSD, but it's traumatic in terms of being chronic and very stressful. Okay. And so these people, whether it's a traumatic experience or series of experiences or this kind of chronic situation, they really form these negative beliefs. We're not destined to believe badly about ourselves, but these thoughts come to us, and then what happens is we find the evidence to prove that what we believe is true.
Because that's what our brains are meant to do.
Oh, yes.
It's I'm here to prove you right.
Yeah, it's almost like the scientist that has kind of some theoretical model. Well, let's prove it.
Let's prove it.
And we do that. You're exactly right. We're the only species on the planet that does that. But what we find is if we start to interrupt that and to start to question it and start to say, is that really accurate? One of my favorite questions to ask people is, if they say something like, I am stupid, I almost routinely ask the question, and who wants you to believe that? How about your, family members? Any of them want you to believe that?
Right.
There's a few times where that might have been the case. But what about your friends? Do your friends believe that you're stupid?
Right.
Is there, if you have children, do your children believe that? Who really wants you to believe that? And the answer is invariably nobody.
And so do you see that these are started, I'm guessing at the beginning of life, or are a lot of these you go through childhood and then you go through some hard experience in the middle of life, or are most of these is there like a time frame when most of these are developed? Or
it's a really good question, and the answer is yes, yes, and yes.
So it could be any point in life.
But quite frequently, they do start out in childhood experience. It can be in junior high, middle school experiences. It can be in high school. We see it throughout the lifespan, and they continue to develop throughout our adult years. And what we know is that if a person has a generally predominant positive sense of who they are, not, pie in the sky, but just kind of realistic, we like to say accurate. And they're kind of a little bit optimistic or at least positive about who they are,
Right.
they don't have disorders.
Wow. They don't have disorder. You're not just saying one disorder. You're saying they don't have mental health disorders.
Yeah. My wife's a classic example of that. She grew up in fairly good settings, but she had brothers and sisters that didn't do as well as she did in terms of interacting with others and things like that. But she learned from her older siblings and said, I'm not going down that way. This is my path. And she's been remarkably resilient her whole life, despite some pretty difficult circumstances.
Wow. It's almost like if you have that key core belief about yourself, that alone can fight off the negativities that bombard us. Because when you're having these natural thoughts of, oh, I screwed up. Oh, why did I do this wrong? Oh, I'm a failure.
Yes.
If those are coming in, but if you have that key core belief of, no, I'm trying my best. No, I can do this better next time. No, I can still be successful. Those can be combated almost, it seems like. But if you don't have that fundamental core belief, those can just flood the system, it seems like. Is that kind of what you're
exactly correct in how you say that?
Interesting.
And it is one of the side benefits of changing negative core beliefs to positive core beliefs, to learn how to do that. And once you do it and then become aware when something hits you.
Can you walk us through that really quick?
Oh, yeah.
Let's take the example of a mom that's, I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And I hear in the women that I'm working with and helping, I sense that a lot. That's a core of like, I just can't do enough. I'm overwhelmed and I'm not doing enough.
Yeah. And it is one of those that is very conscious for a lot of people. So it's actually a 4-step process. We basically say, are you aware of what you're saying to yourself? I had an individual come in to me and say, I'm such an idiot. Well, not enough too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, that's interesting. And I've heard you say that now 3 times in the last 15 minutes. So what is your basis for that? And he said, what do you mean I said that 3 times?
Didn't even notice.
He wasn't aware.
And if he's saying that out loud and not noticing,
how
many times is that flooding his conscious and his subconscious?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's not just that, but many allied thoughts that are also negative core beliefs. So we did work on that. And how do you do this? Well, step 1, first off, become aware. Oh, gosh, I am saying that to myself. Okay. Step 2, and we identify that as a negative core belief. And there, by the way, I should have mentioned this, it's mostly what we would refer to as I am statements.
Okay.
So he was saying, I'm an idiot.
I'm an idiot.
Okay. Now, that am in the I am is a statement of being. It's not how I'm acting. It's who I am.
Well, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Like scarily powerful if you're using it for all these negative
That's right.
ways.
Because you're stuck with who you are. No, you're not. But you believe you are.
That's very confining.
If she was really an idiot,
yeah.
well, she's stuck being an idiot.
Yeah. It's like that's it. There's your idea. Like that's who you are. Wow.
So that awareness piece is really important, but it leads to number 2, and that is, what would you like to believe about yourself? And we call it devising an alternative positive core belief. You may not believe it. In fact, most people will not. But we just like you to put something out, hypothetically. If you're an idiot on one side, what would you like to believe about yourself? And she came up with, I'm okay. I'm smart. Good. Good.
And is that just to see, like, raise their sights? Is that kind of what you're trying? It's like, you don't have to be looking at, the worst case scenario. It's like, look to something, a potential even.
Exactly right. Well, that leads us naturally to the 3rd step, and that is to do something to act on it. What would you do to reinforce the idea that, you're okay and smart? And typically what I'll do if I'm working with somebody is just simply say, I would like you to think of an experience where you were okay and you acted pretty doggone sharp.
Yeah.
Smart. That gets a little interesting, but they'll almost invariably will come up with something on their own.
It's because at all points where, it's like no one can be dumb every moment of their life.
No.
But yet when we say I am, that's the label that you're throwing, the blanket you're throwing over the entirety of who you are as a person.
Exactly.
And so if you can start helping them see that, that makes sense to help them see that. Okay.
So awareness, devising the alternative, positive core belief, act on it.
Act on it.
Last step, number 4, is just to practice it. Somebody put it this way, and I love the way she said it. Oh, I kind of get it. I have to reel myself back in. It was like she was on a fishing expedition. She had to reel herself back to who she really was. Now, the interesting thing about this 4-step process is it's exactly the same process that any of us ever learned anything. So,
see the mistake, then, see what you want, and then change something.
Well, and I'll give you the example, awareness, at some point we could do math. At some point we couldn't drive a car.
At some point we couldn't walk.
So, yes, exactly. And what did we do? We recognized, or were aware that somebody could do things that we couldn't do.
Right.
Okay? So there's the awareness. The second piece was devise the alternative, which was simply, well, yeah, I do want to ride a bike. Or, yeah, I do want to figure out what 3 + 3 is. Because some time ago we didn't.
Right. Or walk. Yeah, or walk. Or I do want to have a beautiful, secure relationship in my marriage or something.
Yeah. So what did we do? Well, we listened to somebody, or somebody coached us, or we figured something out on our own. So what were we doing? We were acting on it. But did anybody learn how to drive a car in 30 minutes?
Yeah.
No, we had to practice it.
With a lot of, especially so many things where we fail over and over and over again. How many times does a kid fall down before they actually can walk across the room?
It's my favorite example. None of us remember it, but we see it in little kiddos, and they never give up. Yeah. But they looked around and said one day to themselves, at a subconscious level, I want to be able to walk. Yeah. And not only that, I want to be able to run. And within a matter of a few weeks or months, they're tearing around the house.
Yeah, it is. And it's remarkable. We take things like that for granted, We do. Like, and this milestone of this to this to this. And it's like the amount of growth and development and failure and overcoming on each one of those levels is actually truly remarkable.
And it's all good. We're learning more. That little child is learning how to get up on all fours, or maybe hold onto a couch or a chair and stand up and wobble around. But does that stop? Do they give up at some point? No. Right. The difference in what we're talking about in terms of key core beliefs is virtually no one understands it's exactly the same process. It's not cheap, it's not easy, but it's doable, and it's amazing how effective it can become in a relatively short time, between 1 and 2 months. If you're conscious and aware of it.
Of this.
And then recognizing, going back, as she said, reeling myself back to what I really want to believe about. Right. Act on it, and then move forward with continuous practice.
Wow. And I love how she said reeling back in, because it's almost metaphorically, the brain can be hijacked, it seems like.
Oh, yeah.
It hits, these thoughts start happening. Your brain starts then telling yourself why all of these things happen to, be true. And then you're ruminating. And then your brain you can be in, left field and believing, for 3 hours that you haven't, something about yourself that you're not realizing that you're still ruminating on, So to be able to recognize it, stop it right where it is before it keeps going and going and going and going, reel it back in and ground yourself.
Exactly right. And it does take concerted effort, but it doesn't take a lot of energy. So it's the gerbil on the little exercise wheel that finally decides he or she has had enough and hops off and gets something to eat.
It's like, I'm done with this. We're going to get off.
I had somebody talking today, as a matter of fact, and he was talking about somebody that had been a drug user for years, a serious, heavy drug user. And one day he looked down and said, "This is not me. Wow. I refuse to define myself this way anymore." He didn't quite use that language, but he says, "I'm not going to do this." He went through horrible, horrific withdrawals. And he made some mistakes. But here's the thing, as the person was describing it, it clicked in his brain. This is not going to be who I am. I am.
That power statement of the I am belief system.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you, that I'm sure, I hope that gives a lot of moms listening right now hope, whether that's them or whether that's someone they know that feels that they are stuck. Because we see a lot of people right now where you want to help them desperately and they just feel so stuck.
They can't escape themselves.
Right. Right. But it's not this, I feel like what most people think, if it's something so hard and so painful, then it has to be some Herculean effort to get out, to be free, to heal. And you're telling me right now that you've seen with the research you've done and implemented this with these clients, all these clients you have, that it doesn't have to be that complicated.
No, it isn't that complicated at all, but it does take concerted effort. I worked in residential treatment for drug and alcohol recovery for about 6 years, and I saw it happen over and over again. I've seen it with people that have come to me with all sorts of, just like I said, horrific experiences in their past, but they're not stuck unless, of course, they believe. I am stuck.
I'm stuck.
Which is another core belief. And so what we do is gently help them to understand that no, they're not. And, let them kind of get a sense that they're not helpless. They're not powerless.
Right.
And we give them evidences out of their own life that that's not defining who they are.
Yes. Yes. Wow. Okay. So a question that I have for you is, what is challenging to women and how they value themselves as mothers?
Yeah. We're just getting all sorts of messages and we've been getting them for decades.
Societally kind of?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But it never got quite so prominent as to when social media came along. And what do mothers do? What do we all do to some degree? But I think it impacts women so much more.
Women are the top users
of
social media.
Yeah. And what do? They compare themselves with others. And of course, on Facebook, we don't put down our worst day. We put down all of the good things about our lives. Right. And so they're constantly seeing that. Well, I don't measure up to that.
Because they're comparing their real, true, normal, imperfect self to someone's fake, perfect self.
Exactly
and
right.
That disparity is just, but how is it? Because I feel like women cognitively, I believe at some point realize that. But yet they still then go, oh, and my house doesn't look that way. And oh, she has just the most perfect family and home and this and the trip they went on. And they still compare.
Oh, yes.
Why is that? Is that just a feminine trait of comparison?
I don't think it's feminine. I think we all do it. It's a natural, what we might refer to as the comparison process. And we see this in the way we look at that is what we refer to as up ladder or down ladder. So if I'm superior to somebody, I'm higher up the ladder and I'm looking down at them. And that's quite common. But I think more for women than men, they get down the ladder and look up at almost everybody else in their world. And they keep getting messages, whether it's social media or somebody says almost an innocuous statement, or they grew up in a family where women were some degree undervalued. We get the constant message today, gee, is it really important to be a mother and not have a career? Or maybe you ought to have a career and not be a mother.
Right.
We're getting all sorts of mixed messages. And then women are trying to do it all. That's been going on for decades. And
then they're breaking under the pressure because it's so hard to
nobody can achieve that comparison model of perfection.
Yeah.
But we talk about perfectionism. Well, it's mostly based on this idea of I'm comparing myself with somebody else. So the person that introduced that concept to me is up ladder, down ladder. He said, get off the ladder.
Get off the ladder. And isn't that quote, comparison is the thief of joy? At least I've heard that.
Yeah, it's the thief of joy. And I always like to say it's the prerequisite of pride. But pride can be both positive in a sense of looking down and negative as a sense of looking up.
I don't think people, I didn't realize that concept until I was much older, that pride is both ways.
It's both ways. Yeah.
So
really we do want to get off that ladder of not thinking that we're better than somebody and get off the ladder and then not thinking that we're inferior. And I think the other piece to this is that we are all individuals. We all think differently. Our brains operate differently. We look differently. We have different experiences. And that's okay.
We can be totally different people because that's what the world needs, right?
Yes.
We need this variety in all ways,
Yeah. And going back to that, I'm an idiot or I'm not smart or whatever, psychology's done a lousy job of trying to figure out what does it mean to be intelligent. And the answer is there's no such thing as intelligence. You can't get it off an IQ test. What it is that all of us have hundreds of abilities that we bring to the table in a very unique way, based on our background, based on our genetics to some degree, based on how we've developed ourselves. And we all have something to contribute. And some people are going to do it in one way.
Some people are going to do it a totally different way.
Exactly.
But yet our society, it almost seems that they don't allow for that. I mean, you look at standardized test taking.
Yes.
Oh, the kid didn't pass the ACT. You're going to struggle and your life's going to, and all of these things are said instead of maybe that kid is very intellectual in a different way that a test can't see.
Precisely.
But yet then what does that kid think about themselves?
Well, and I think it's a real problem. And I think I'm glad you brought that up because we're talking about something that's called neurodivergence now, that everybody is different than everybody else in how they process and act on their information that comes to them, what they perceive. So, for example, one of my real things that I don't like is so many children are diagnosed with either attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Right. Okay, and what have we done? We put them in a box and we've told them two things. You've got a deficit and you have a disorder. When in fact...
And here's some drugs.
Yeah, and here's some drugs.
Yeah.
And the deal is they're just processing information differently. So why don't we acknowledge that, celebrate them? Usually these are the people that are entrepreneurs. They almost all don't focus on just one thing.
Right.
The other side of that coin is if a child is interested in something, they're going to focus on it. They're not going to have any attention problems. Okay?
Right. It's like give them, but when we're expected to have kids in a classroom sitting down for long amounts of time, even just seeing the difference between boys and girls. I mean, you see boys, I think, are much more, they have a higher amount that people are saying that, the ADHD, maybe it's just because they don't need to be in a desk for that many hours.
That's right.
They just need to get their energy out.
And maybe they need to process information differently. Yeah. Not all people learn the same way. We know that. We've known it for years.
Yeah. Or it's visually or audio.
Kinesthetic, hearing, audible.
Right.
Yeah. And then it bleeds over to mothers. What did I do wrong?
And then they blame themselves.
And I can't tell you, as we talk about blame and finding fault, the people that we blame and find fault with by far for the average person is ourselves. So why do we need to play the blame game? Like we're going to punish ourselves enough until we get it right? Right. It doesn't work.
Yeah, and it's not benefiting, getting to that point, unless it's like, okay, let's do something about this. But,
yeah. And you can see how that really breeds anxiety. Yeah. And here's the other thing that I don't think we're paying enough attention to. Mothers need more support on how to see themselves positively, accurately, and constructively for two reasons. First and foremost, for themselves. But second, almost as importantly, is because the children are paying attention to their mothers, their parents, and they're picking up cues.
And that's probably, I'm sure you see a cyclical, if a mom has, anxiety and depression, if she's worrying about things or stressing about things, and then are her kids going to, be taking on that similar amount of concern or stress or beliefs?
I can't tell you the number of people that come into my office and says, depression runs in my family. Oh, really? You found the depression gene?
Yeah. It's like, is this there
might be a proclivity to it. I don't know. But what I do know is people that have been chronically depressed, and which, by the way, is related to anxiety, they can come out of it. And, oh, by the way, that benefits them, but it benefits everybody in their family, particularly their children. We're not stuck.
Yes.
And we are so amazingly capable of moving forward. We like to say that underlying feelings, and we won't talk into that too much, but everybody eventually comes back to 3 underlying feelings about who they are in almost every case.
Ooh, what are those?
3 core beliefs. The first one is, I am worthy. And this isn't because somebody said that. It's because if I told the truth about something, yeah, I'm acting in consonance with my belief, and I am a worthy person. The second one is, I'm acceptable to myself. Not because of any feedback from somebody else, just because, yeah, I handled that situation. Yeah, that's acceptable to me.
To me. Like I did the best I could. This is acceptable. Okay.
And which rolls directly to the underlying belief, I am also capable.
Wow. Those are powerful.
They are powerful.
Those are really powerful.
And they're all core
statements.
beliefs. And here's the interesting thing. You talk to people, unless they're very unusual circumstances, everybody, sooner or later gravitates right back to those 3 core beliefs.
Wow.
So somebody's having a really bad day, a mom, everything's gone haywire. Okay.
The chaos.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And their little kiddo falls down and perhaps scrapes their elbow or their knee or whatever. Oh, come here, hon. Let me
help you.
Yeah, right. And within 3-5 minutes,
the kid's fine and they're off and running again.
He's off and running. And although the mother doesn't think it, notice how it reinforces. I'm a worthy mother. I'm acceptable to myself as a mother. You know, you didn't have to get feedback from the child, although you're kind of getting. And I'm a pretty doggone capable mom too.
Yeah.
Nobody could have done that as well as that particular mom for that particular child.
Wow.
And we always come back to that. The only question is, are we going to come back sooner or later? And that means, are we going to get kind of wrapping around in our negative core beliefs so we keep going back to those negative messages that you just talked about a few minutes ago? Right. Or are we going to pay more attention to who we really are?
And right now, I think what's beautifully important about what you just said is that's internally sourced.
Yes.
Right now, I am seeing I need validation from this group or these people or these friends or these parents or whoever it is. For some reason, our world has conditioned people to say you are valued if somebody else thinks you're valued. Yes. And yet our value has no dependence on what anybody else thinks. But yet we seek for that so strongly as a society.
Yeah, exactly right.
And it's crushing people. The weight of that is crushing people. And I think specifically is for women, this idea of the standard of beauty.
Oh yeah.
Is it's so unrealistic.
It's impossible.
It's impossible, especially with age. It's like for some reason women feel like they're not allowed to age anymore, and yet so much of that is externally. You know, it's like is the mom, is it really for herself, or is it because she doesn't want to look a certain way because of what she thinks other people think of her, or
exactly.
on and on, you know?
Yeah. And again, they get down the ladder, compare themselves with everybody. Yeah. I mean, nobody puts up Facebook pictures when they're looking bedraggled, but we all look bedraggled from time to time, okay?
We all wake up in the morning, right?
And so it's really important for women to understand, and this kind of goes back to what you're saying and how I define these 2 things. Self-esteem, from my vantage point, is what somebody else says about you that you believe. Positively or not.
Or negatively.
And self-worth is much more important. It's what you tell yourself that you believe, either positively
or negatively.
Yeah.
Wow.
And what we want is for people to get to the point where most of the messages come from within, because the most valuable ones do. We are self-correcting. We all make mistakes. We all do things and think, what was I thinking?
Right.
Most of the time we weren't.
Yeah.
But the point is we recognize it.
Right.
We're aware of it. We say, wait a minute, no, that's not the way to handle it.
Yeah.
I've got to act on that differently. And the next time when it comes up, I'll know how to handle it differently. It's the same 4 steps.
Right. And it seems like having something like that and being able to have moms teach that to their children.
Yes.
Like how vital if kids didn't have to have hundreds of negative core beliefs that they take with them through the rest of their life.
Yeah.
So how, in your opinion, as moms, would be the best way possible to instill this in children?
Model it.
Model it. Would you say even verbally, like, oh, I thought that, like, how would you do that if so much of it is going on, within our own psyche? How would you just say that out loud, or how would you?
Well, the biggest thing is children are highly observant. They don't know how to express what they're observing. They may not make any sense out of it, per se. But if they see consistent behavioral patterns, either positive or not, they pick up on it. It's just like by osmosis, it comes in. So the more that the mother feels reasonably self-assured within herself as worthy, acceptable, and capable, the more the child is going to pick up on it. Now, can it be reinforced by discussions and conversations and working through circumstances? The child comes home and, Billy called me a name, and mom can kind of talk them through that.
Go through that with resilience. And it kind of comes back to the same idea. Hey, you're a really wonderful child. Yeah. And doggone it, you're acceptable to me. I hope you're acceptable to you. Instilling that worth back in them.
Exactly.
And just showing, not that the mom is instilling it, but showing the child the value, the innate value that they have. Just repeating that.
Exactly. And that's when the behavior of the mother coincides with whatever the mother's sharing with the child. And the child picks up on that, and it's just natural from that point on.
Wow.
You don't have to, quote unquote, teach it, but sometimes it is helpful. Yeah. And I wish, frankly, there were more programs in elementary and the middle years and also in high school would help people to become what has been referred to in the literature as emotionally intelligent. Right. But which I would say is really coming back to who they really are, their core beliefs of being worthy, acceptable, and capable to themselves. Not in a highfalutin, I'm better way, just in a kind of a quiet assurance within themselves.
And where that teaching needs to come within the home. Where it's like that really is the parent's role, to be teaching those fundamental core values.
Exactly. It is largely the parent's behavior that determines that. Yeah, and the other thing that we haven't talked about, and we probably won't get a chance to right now, is how the parents interact with each other. Children are constantly paying attention to how the two partner parents are either working very effectively or not. And they're picking up on all sorts of subconscious cues as to what works, or in some cases what doesn't work, and then thinking that that's what the reality is.
Or this is how you treat people, or this is how you don't treat people, or hey, this is permissible or unpermissible. They're seeing all of that. Yeah. And I think, again, this kind of goes back to this larger question. Mothers really need to be honored by others. I 100% agree.
I'm a firm believer of saying to guys, no person ever carried a child for 9 months, then went through labor and delivery, and worried about that little infant from that point to the rest of their lives. Mothers play an incredibly unique, noble, incomprehensible, beautiful part of life for so many. And why can't we really have, for example, parents that treat each other with respect and kindness and empathy and trust? Yes. And that's a topic of another night probably, but
I know there's so many things we could cover, but I love that. And I think that if more people were treating each other better in general, we would be able to go through life and share those beautiful examples with our children. But how many of marriage relationships are struggling because negative key core beliefs are a part of that, right? And so I loved reading in your book one of the examples of a woman that was having a lot of marital concerns and issues and everything in it, and it came down to her key core beliefs. It wasn't about the other person. It wasn't about the situation. It was about what she was telling herself over and over and over again. And she solved that, and she was able to overcome so many of these other obstacles in marriage because she was able to fix that negative key core belief she had about herself. So it's powerful.
It really is.
It's so powerful.
One of the things in our book is the fact that there are a lot of stories. And they're highlighting and illustrating how we're not stuck, that we can move in positive directions. And not only we can do that, that we call it the 100% guarantee. We're going to feel better about who we are, and we're going to know better who we are. Okay? And the 80% guarantee says, and those around us will positively respond to that.
Ooh, that's interesting.
There have been couples on the verge of divorce, for example.
Okay.
And one person says, I'm not going to act and behave this way anymore. I'm going to change what I believe about myself.
Okay.
I'm going to change how I'm kind, as opposed to one of the words I hear all of the time is mean.
Okay.
Get that out of your vocabulary. But I'm going to change my perspective on who I am. If they do that consistently, after about 3 weeks, they start to say, this works. And after
Only
about
3 weeks.
Yeah. And after about 8 weeks, it's locked in and it's not going back. There's no slippery slope back to where they were.
Really?
Yeah. And that's how people get through trauma and so many other just kind of burdens that they've been hauling around with them.
And some of these are so heavy, these rocks that were carrying for years. And to get to the point where it's like, you don't have to.
No.
You don't have to carry this anymore. You don't have to have this weighing you down. And yet it can be so simple.
It is pretty straightforward.
And it affects all the rest of your life. Once you change, what I loved reading in your book is once you change that key core belief, it's not just then, then that changed one aspect. Oh, that changed my marriage relationship. Yeah. It changes all your relationships and your health. I mean, so much of happiness is directly related to our health, and there's studies all over that prove that people that are happier and more positive are generally healthier people. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not rocket science, folks.
Yeah, I know. It's like there's a reason to that. Okay. I wanted to ask another question here. So how do previous traumatic or distressing experiences affect mothers? I think we've kind of already gone over that.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's this issue that when a person goes through those kinds of experiences, their beliefs typically do change to a negative way.
Right.
And when they come out of it, it's almost the difference between night and day. Wow. They come out of the darkness into the light.
Wow.
And by the way, I got to tell you, that happened to me. So
really?
In fact, there's a story in the book, and it's about me, because that's why I got into the field of counseling and psychology, is because I found out that a core belief or core beliefs that I'd had for years they weren't accurate. Nobody wanted me to believe that, and I could change them. 3 weeks to see the results starting to pile up, and about 8 weeks to lock it in.
Wow, and yet people go through therapy for years.
Oh, yeah.
And I know people that have been going through therapy for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And they are not, I would say they're marginally different, but they're not dramatically different. And I've wondered about that. It's like, is this person, and these people, I wonder if they get to the point where they just think, yes, I am just this broken.
Yes,
if
I am.
Like I am just this broken. If it takes this long, and if I can't heal for this long, maybe I am just that broken.
Yeah.
And so you're telling me, so as a PhD, you're telling me that if you can have the right tools, that people could solve this with or without counseling? Or do you have to have a counselor?
No. Lots of people solve many things, even pretty hefty PTSD type of experiences, because they get to a point that say, wait a minute, I'm not going to let this identify me as to who I am. And once they have that determination, nothing gets in their way.
Wow.
Now, if they have some tools, it helps things and gets things rolling a little bit faster. And so therapy can certainly be helpful, particularly with what we would refer to as complex PTSD. But beyond that, even in those circumstances, individuals can learn. If they're ready to change, we talk about 80% effectiveness.
Right.
Pretty amazing in psychology.
Yeah. The fact
what about the other 20%?
Yeah. What about the people that they go through all of that and nothing?
And they're just at one point in their life, and I say, I'm never going to give up on them. And sooner or later, they're going to get to a better place and they're going to say, I've had enough. Wow. This is not accurate. This is not helpful. And I can move beyond this. And it's going to take some effort. It might even be a little bit uncomfortable.
Right.
But recognizing that
there's a way out.
There's a way out.
There's a way out of it.
And they're as worthy and acceptable and capable as anybody else on the face of the planet.
Wow. I think that's so empowering to hear that anyone can do this.
Yeah, even me.
Yeah. Yeah. Going through that. I'm grateful for my parents that taught me so many different, so many beautiful things, but along this line of don't let what happened to you or your experiences or anything define you. Yes. Let it refine you.
Yes.
And that's been this okay, so many people, it's like, oh, this happened to me. And then they go into, I am a victim instead of I have been victimized. But that doesn't define me on who I am. But when you label yourself as a victim, you're going to stay in that box until perpetuity.
Yeah.
And until you're willing to say, you know what, that did happen to me, and acknowledge like, oh yeah, maybe something happened, but that doesn't mean that I have to define myself by it. Right. I can refine myself by it. I can become stronger and better and more capable and more resilient because of what's happened, and I think a lot of people slap a label on and they get truly stuck and they just stay there.
Yeah. And I think that's what you said is so important, because those labels become how we see ourselves and identify ourselves, and that gets embedded. And that's one of the things that we talk about in the book. Labels don't do anybody any good. Yeah. I mentioned the fact that I worked with folks that were coming out of drug and alcohol addictions.
Right.
And they labeled everybody.
Oh.
But guess who they labeled the most?
Themselves.
Yes.
Oh.
And so we talk about, it's perfectly all right to describe behaviors. It's perfectly all right to share your feelings.
Right.
But don't go into the labeling business. I'm an idiot, or I'm worthless, or I'm not enough.
Right.
Go back to what is more accurate and more truthful, and that is, I have my down moments. Yes, I do make mistakes.
Yes. Hey, I struggle with this. Not I am an alcoholic. I struggle with alcoholism.
Right.
Even just those two difference, I am versus this is a behavior or a feeling instead of this is a core identity.
Exactly.
Wow. It makes me want to go through. And your book is so fascinating because it's so well organized, because you learn about these topics, and then it says, look through each one of these and rate yourself on each one of these topics. And it really helps you introspect, because I think we can, on a very surface level say, okay, yeah, do I have any negative thoughts? Yeah, maybe not, whatever. And then when you see each one of these and you think through it, it really helps you understand ones that you are telling yourself, even subconsciously, that I didn't realize. I was like, I am telling myself that. I don't want to say that to myself anymore. No. But if you don't, the whole part of this is most people have no idea from the very beginning. They don't even have any idea what's going on in their head.
And that's why in the book we give lots of examples.
Excuse me.
So that people really can say, oh yeah, I maybe have a negative belief. Now here's a list of about 40 of them. 40
of the top,
Yeah, and you may not identify with any of them, but I'll bet you pick up 2 or 3 or 4 that pop up at yourself.
Right. And if you don't get rid of these key core beliefs, something that I loved that you were talking about is that they can stay with you the rest of your life.
That's correct.
And so if you don't dismantle or dismember or sever these core beliefs that you've attached to yourself, it can just go into perpetuity. Do you see?
Yep.
You see this, and it just continues to affect people
forever. And what you said a few moments ago, it's either defining yourself or refining yourself. That's a great phrase. I don't know if you captured it, but I didn't. But the point of the exercise is that's exactly right. All of these are growth opportunities, and it's exciting. Life is never anything more than a series of ways to see things differently, explore things, and find out who you are and find out who others are.
Yeah.
At their core. Not at the shallow surface stuff. Because somebody's seen a picture of somebody and because they've been to a professional photographer.
Right.
That's not life.
Yes. Professional photographer and all the filters that are put on and, all the Photoshop that is now. And now with AI.
Oh, yes.
No, we're truly, where it's like, there's actually nothing real about that picture.
That's exactly
that
right.
we see, which is even more concerning, because then you see this next generation, is that even when Photoshop,
right.
we got to a point that, oh yeah, you could take a beautiful picture in lighting. Then Photoshop was introduced, and that made things way harder to be able to see what is real and not. And now AI has just taken that to a whole other level, which I wonder how that will affect future generations.
I don't know, but I do have my apprehensions.
Yes, so do I. So we've talked about so many incredible topics, and as we wrap up specifically tonight, I know that there's so much more that we can talk about, and I hope that we have another chance that we can sit down, because, like you said, women need all the help they can get, because our role as mothers is vital.
Yes.
And I just want to ask you, as a person, what encouragement can you give moms right now, as you've had all this experience with women over the decades? Mm-hmm. What is the best encouragement you can give mothers?
The first thing is that no matter what somebody's gone through, it can be worked through to a positive outcome. We call it outcome research, and we see that the outcomes are consistent. We know that, and so we want mothers to feel encouraged and hopeful and enabled to work through anything. Sometimes that's a little scary, and sometimes it's very scary.
Right.
And we talked earlier, the second piece that I would add, we talked about empathic kindness. And we need to exercise empathy and kindness to ourselves. Be kind to ourselves, be gentle to ourselves, and then we can start to deal with some of these things. It really does go back to ancient perspectives, to care for our neighbors, and as we care for ourselves, or love.
Yes.
And we can even talk about how you can measure love in the context of your relationships with others, as you see it for yourself, and how you can improve that, and then how that improves relationships with others.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all of this wealth of knowledge that I'm hoping moms out there right now can know that there's hope, that they can see that this isn't just, oh yeah, one person made it through and I know you can't do it. This is you as a PhD that is coming here with decades of experience and research, and knowing that if moms can incorporate the right things, they can heal from anything.
Yeah.
And they can live truly happy, successful lives in all aspects of their lives.
Absolutely.
And
One of my favorite words are courage and encourage.
I like that.
The word cur is from the Latin.
Okay.
It means heart. And to encourage others is to give them a little bit of our heart. That's what mothers do. Always with their children.
It's true.
Okay?
That's true.
And to have courage is to be more wholehearted, more complete. And we can all not only aspire to that, but achieve it ever more gracefully throughout our lives. I'm still growing and developing. I haven't arrived, but the cool thing is it just gets better and better. And I believe that sincerely for all individuals, but particularly the ones that probably deserve it the most, moms.
And that's why we're here tonight. Thank you for joining us. It's been a beautiful night.
No, it's been a pleasure on my part. Thanks for having me have a chance to chat with you.
Thanks.